This person is quite the talk of the town, right? Everyone in China knows about Wang Xifeng. She's practically become a household name, a label for a certain type of person. You could even call her the poster child for that type. For instance, in our daily lives or at work, we come across folks who are savvy, always on the ball, alert, fearless yet careful, and unflappable in tough situations, just like that character Mrs. A Qing saw in modern Chinese opera, right? That's the kind of person she embodies. So Wang Xifeng has become a quintessential character, and we often refer to her. For instance, someone might be a dead ringer for Wang Xifeng, or you could say they're just like her, don't you think? Alright, when it comes to a character like Wang Xifeng, I see her as super smart, a gift that most folks just don't have. But you know where the problem sneaks in? Her smarts are tied up with ambition, and that ends up leading to a whole lot of foolishness. And that's like a mirror of what's really going on in China. When Grandma Jia was on her way out, she only talked to 3 people standing around her. First off, she had a heart-to-heart with Baoyu, telling him to step up his game. Man, she really had a soft spot for Baoyu, didn't she? Then, what did she say to Xifeng? You're just too dang smart. You better start racking up some good karma in the future. Yup, she straight up told her to start making up for it. I suffered a lot in my younger days because I was too clever, Grandma Jia admitted. And back in the day, she was the one running the show for the Jia family, managing the household. She reckoned that being too clever brought her a heap of trouble. So Grandma Jia saw it crystal clear, Xifeng's too sharp for her own good, she'd better start piling on the good karma and turning things around. What's the deal with the character of Wang Xifeng? Chao Shuoqin used her to illustrate the tragedy in the real world of China, which is the biggest kind of foolishness in Chinese reality. First off, let's peek at what's written in the drawer of the cabinet in the fantasy illusory space. What's the scoop on Wang Xifeng's future? Both a painting and a poem are like crystal balls showing what's up ahead for this character. And how's the painting looking? Well, it's like an iceberg, and perched on top is a female phoenix. I mean, come on, we all know who that's gotta be. It's Wang Xifeng, right? I mean, her name literally means phoenix. So, what's with this iceberg? It's all about the power of the Jia and Wang families she's got her eye on, and just like an iceberg, it's not gonna last forever. Icebergs melt, right? So, that's the symbolism. She's all about relying on the Jia and Wang families, and that's as shaky as an iceberg. And her legal shenanigans? They're just like that too. So how is this verdict written? Wang Xifeng's verdict is composed of 4 lines of poetry. Let's first look at the first line. The first 2 characters employ the method of character dissection, where the character phoenix is represented by 2 characters. When combined, they represent the phoenix, which is associated with the character Feng in Wang Xifeng's name. The rest of the line imply that Wang Xifeng was born in the wrong era. It suggests that it is not a bad thing for a talented person to have their abilities recognized and utilized, but the problem lies in the fact that such a talented individual is living in turbulent times. If she had lived in an era of peace and prosperity, she would have been considered a capable administrator. However, she happened to be born in a chaotic era, where the entire Jia family was inevitably declining and deteriorating uncontrollably. Living in such a turbulent era, what is she then? A cunning and ambitious figure. This is her unavoidable fate. Since she was a kid, she was a real tomboy. Her old man was all about her tough and uncompromising nature. But then, she got hitched into the Jia clan, and man, that clan was a whole other story. The Jia family was going through rough times, and it was one big soap opera in there. Backstabbing, scheming, and let me tell you, those assistants were a real pain. The high-class ones and the old family assistants were all a handful. And those mothers-in-law, right? Those daughters-in-law, they were all a handful too. Later on, Wang Xifeng really got the hang of it. She had to run the show at home, dealing with over 300 people. The Rong Palace was stuffed with over 300 people, and it was chaos, with everyone fighting internally, even the servants, and the factions going at it. With the way things were, Lady Wang or Mrs. Jia herself wasn't up to snuff. She was a pushover. So, she let her niece, who was a real go-getter, take over the reins at home. Faced with that situation, just think about the choices Wang Xifeng could make. Daughter-in-law Li Wan was definitely out of the question, right? What did Wang Xifeng call her? A saint, a total pushover. If she ran things at home, it would be a total disaster, right? So, Wang Xifeng knew full well that instead of beating around the bush, she had to take the lead and make some tough calls. What do you call that? A ruthless schemer for ruthless times has shown up. Granny Jia was getting old, and all she wanted was to kick back in her later years, right? She definitely wanted to step down. Lady Wang was a no-go, so it was all up to Wang Xifeng. But sadly, she was stuck in the end of an era. She is admired by all for her talent in this lifetime. That's right, no matter what, a person with talent should always strive to make use of it. But what is her ultimate fate? As the story unfolds, her entire journey is told through her relationship with Jia Lian, her husband. It can be divided into 3 stages. In the first stage, Jia Lian listens to her and follows her advice. In the second stage, the dynamic changes, and Jia Lian starts to dominate and control her. In the end, what happens to Wang Xifeng? She is divorced by the Jia family because of the catastrophic consequences caused by her actions. However, it was not explicitly written in the final 40 chapters, right? Actually, she was indeed divorced. After the divorce, what does she do? She returns to her hometown, as described in the last chapter, crying and lamenting over the tragic events in Jinling. Why is it even more tragic? Because her Wang family also fell into ruin. Some researchers have pieced together from clues in the first 80 chapters that when Wang Xifeng returned to her hometown, the Wang family had already fallen. Later on, she ended up working as a maid in a wealthy family, doing menial tasks like sweeping the floor. And now, the current ending says she died of illness, right? In Gao Yi's continuation of the book, it says she died of illness, and it wasn't described as tragic enough, right? It should have been very tragic, but the TV series made it even more tragic, right? Not the new version, but the old TV series of Dream of the Red Chamber, where they were locked in a temple, right? Inside the temple of the Earth God. Baoyu later escaped, and Xifeng died in this prison. This was a temporary detention center. So, in the last 40 chapters, it says she later died of illness, but who cares, anyway? This is the tragedy of Wang Xifeng. You know, when it comes to great novels like Dream of the Red Chamber, it's not as simple as having good guys and bad guys. It's not like they painted Wang Xifeng as some kind of villain, not at all. In my view, when you're writing a character in Dream, every one of them has their own struggles. Some folks might not get it and think it's just putting someone down, but the truth is, everyone has their own hardships, and every situation has its own sadness. It's all about having empathy for the characters and the world, so what's the point of judging or criticizing? When we look at Wang Xifeng, we can see the tragedy of Chinese society. Everyone goes through hardships, living in it, dealing with its struggles day in and day out, often feeling it deeply but not being able to put it into words. That's exactly what Dream of the Red Chamber has captured. For thousands of years, the decline of Chinese society has been obvious, and as a result, all sorts of wicked deeds can be seen in society. This is at the heart of Wang Xifeng's character. Wang Xifeng is actually quite a character. First of all, she's an amazing storyteller. But you know what, she's not so great with recognizing all the Chinese characters. I mean, one time she was doing some bookkeeping, and then she bumped into Baoyu and was like, "Hey, can you take a look at this?" That just shows she was not fully in command of the written language. But let me tell you, listening to her talk is something else. Whenever she's hanging out with Lady Wang and the gang at Grandmother Jia's place, she's always chatting about stuff. And you know what? She can turn the most boring topics into lively chats, and she's always got some jokes up her sleeve. When she's about to crack a joke, the maids can't even leave, and second madam has to be like, "Hold up, she's about to tell a joke, so everyone stick around." They can't even walk away. When she talks about stuff, it's like she brings it to life. She can sum up a character in just a few words. For example, when she's talking about Baoyu, she describes her as a beauty lamp that would just go out with the slightest wind, a pretty vivid image, right? And when she's talking about Baochai, she's like, minding her own business and keeping her mouth shut, and if you ask her, she just shakes her head and knows nothing. That's how she paints the picture of Baochai. And what about Jia Zhen, huh? He's just another son of Jia Zhen, born to Zhao Yining, who was just a concubine, not the main wife. Baoyu, on the other hand, is the main wife's son. So, you get it, right? Jia Zhen and Baoyu are poles apart. Baoyu is all clear and beautiful, so full of life. So, let me tell you, what's Jia Zhen like? Well, according to Feng Jie, that's Wang Xifeng, he's like an irritated little stray cat, you know, just seeking out wherever's warm on a really cold day. That's Jia Zhen for you. And when it comes to Li Wan, Feng Jie just sums it up with, "All right, that's enough, there's nothing more to say." It's just so vivid when she talks. So, Feng Jie is extremely clever. These sisters established a poetry society, right? They went ahead and invited her to join the poetry society and gave her a position, asking her to hold a post. Hold what? A monitor, or let's say a poetry critic. Feng Jie said, "I never knew how to write poetry, right? What did you invite me here for? I understand, you want me to be a poetry critic, thinking about my money, it's about funding. Isn't it?" Feng Jie being the manager of the household affairs in the palace. Applying for funds, right? Then she immediately told Li Wan. "The old lady thinks you're pitiful, right? Your monthly salary is much higher than everyone else's, you earn hundreds of taels of silver each year, right? Can't you take out a little? Play with your sisters and make some poems, what's wrong with that?" And she started addressing Li Wan. Li Wan suddenly became furious. "You pauper," she began to accuse her. In fact, Feng Jie was just joking, she understood very well in her heart, how can I not contribute money? You invite me to be a poetry critic, I've hit the nail on the head, thinking about the money. And after Li Wan rebuked her, Feng Jie said, "Don't worry. How can I not do it? If I don't do it, how can I survive in this palace?" When everyone saw that she agreed, they were all happy. They said, "We were just about to write poems today, and it just snowed. They want to write linked verse, each person contributes one line, right?" So it continued on like this. This poem about the snow. The first line is for you to write. Feng Jie did it. She said, "Last night I slept in bed, I heard the wind blowing very tight, in the morning the snow had covered the ground, right? Let me contribute a line, a night of tight north wind, everyone cheered. Although this line was not so good, it left a lot of room for those who would write the following poems. Please have a drink, she recited, a night of tight north wind, took a sip, and left. You know, Feng Jie is such an interesting character. That's why Grandma Jia is so fond of her. In her later years, if it wasn't for Feng Jie keeping her company, Grandma Jia would have missed out on a lot of joy. Feng Jie is really cute in that way, you see. She's got a good grasp on things, and she's pretty fascinating, speaks with a lot of life, and has a great sense of humor. Towards the end, she couldn't speak like that anymore, huh? And then she's always playing around, teasing Grandma Jia, right? Can you believe she dares to tease Grandma Jia? And you know what, Grandma Jia actually enjoys it, right? So that's Feng Jie for you, a really complex and interesting character, right? You can't just look at it in a simple way. Alright, let's talk about her tragic situation. So, remember when Qin Keqing died? Jia Zhen made sure to organize a really proper funeral, and even secured an official position for his son by paying 1,200 taels of silver for an imperial guard position. But even after all that, he was still feeling uneasy, and Baoyu noticed. He asked Jia Zhen, "What else is bothering you?" And then Jia Zhen told him, "There's no one looking after things inside the Ning Palace. I mean, when you're from such a well-off and important family, you'd expect a lot of people to come pay their respects at a funeral, right? It's always the nobles and their families, and you've got to make sure you treat them well and don't mess up. And with a big family like theirs, hosting so many guests, there really needs to be someone in charge of making sure everything runs smoothly. And who should be doing that? Well, it should be Jia Zhen's wife, Yushi. But she claimed to be sick and couldn't leave her room. We get it, she said her old illness flared up again. But we all know the real reason. She knows how her daughter-in-law died, so of course, she's ignoring the whole situation. And because of all this, the whole household is in chaos, and Jia Zhen can't help but worry. Man, Baoyu ain't no fool. He talked to Jia Zhen about recommending someone to him, but he had to be sneaky about it because of the folks around. Baoyu ain't dumb, I tell ya. Everyone in the whole Jia mansion is sharp, except for this one gal. Crazy thing about her is, whenever she cries, someone bites the dust, and when she laughs, someone else bites the dust. She's a real piece of work. So, Baoyu whispered to Jia Zhen, making sure no one else could hear, and said, "I've got someone in mind to recommend to you." Wanna know who? It's Xifeng. When Jia Zhen heard the name Xifeng, he said, "Ah, her. She's always been something else since she was a kid, decisive and determined. We gotta get Lady Xing and Lady Wang's input. We should start with Lady Xing because Xifeng is her daughter-in-law. But Xifeng's husband, though technically Lady Xing's son, he's actually born to a concubine, so Lady Xing would not have much interest in her affairs. Xifeng is Lady Wang's people. If Lady Wang has any qualms, we'll see how it all plays out." The chapters from 13 to 16 are a wild ride. The real star of the show is Wang Xifeng, and it's all about her impressive career and how she handles things at the Ning Palace. We were reading near the end of the 13th chapter, and we came across this part where it says, Jia Zhen refused to sit down. So, what was going on? Well, it was the day when Lady Wang and Lady Xing came to Ning Palace to offer condolences, and Xifeng was there too. After Baoyu suggested something, Jia Zhen asked for Xifeng to come out. Jia Zhen politely refused to sit down, and he kind of forced a smile and said, "Your nephew, Jia Zhen, is of a lower rank than Lady Wang and Lady Xing, has got something to ask of both my aunts and my big sister." Lady Xing asked, "What's up?" Jia Zhen quickly smiled and said, "Auntie, you know that my grandson's wife has passed away, and my daughter-in-law, referring to you sure, is also sick. I feel like things are not in order, so if I could ask my big sister to come here and take care of things for a month, I'd feel better." Lady Xing said, "Ah, I see. Your big sister is with your other aunt right now," referring to Xifeng being with Lady Wang. "Just talk to her. She's still young and hasn't dealt with this stuff before. If she can't handle it properly, it'll be a joke, and it'll just make things more difficult for everyone." Jia Zhen smiled and said, "I get what you're saying, Auntie. You're worried my big sister will have a hard time. If things aren't managed well, I promise to take care of it. Even if we make a few mistakes, it'll still look okay to others. Since she was young, my big sister has always been strong-willed and determined. Now that she's married and handling things at the palace, she's become even more mature. I feel like these days, there's no one else except my big sister. If Auntie doesn't take into account my position and that of my daughter-in-law, then at least consider the deceased." After saying this, tears fell from his eyes. Lady Wang was worried that Xifeng had never dealt with funeral matters before and was afraid of causing embarrassment. Seeing Jia Zhen in such a state, Lady Wang felt a bit sympathetic and then allowed Xifeng would handle the situation.